Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Friday, September 29th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Maryland game is in 8 days. The game against Michigan in 57 days. Earlier in the week, we talked to our buddy Ross Fulton about Ohio State's struggles in short yardage. Had some bad news in that show for Ohio State. Ended on a high note. Today, we're going to be talking about the Ohio State defense. So this is going to be a mostly good news show. What a change of pace that is from a year ago. And we're going to be talking to Ross about 6 different plays here. A lot of different things to talk about. And one of the reasons I love talking to Ross about this stuff is he'll look at plays and he'll send me a description and just, hey, the first one is JT wrong arming and spilling to Davis and Igbinosun. And this is something he views as a JT Tuimoloau play. And then when you watch the broadcast, no one mentions JT Tuimoloau. The replay doesn't show JT Tuimoloau doing anything. It's all a Davis and Igbinosun play. So Ross, let's start with this one. Tell us about the JT Tuimoloau play that completely escaped notice at the time.
I got to give a shout out to Devin Radcliffe. Gave me a hard time about my office being a mess yesterday, so I had to clean up my background. There you go, Devin. I wanted to focus here on sort of some of the good and the bad of the Ohio State run defense, and I think there has been some focus on that. I mean, on the one hand, Notre Dame did have some success on the ground. They played keep away. I think I heard a stat that Notre Dame had something like 8 runs go for 70 some yards, and then the other 20 though went for only 70 yards too. So there was some good, there was some bad. And this first one is definitely the good. Notre Dame ran a lot to the boundary, which we've talked about a lot with the offense. So Notre Dame just wore out running to the short side of the field, which it makes sense against the Ohio State defense when you think about it, because Jim Knowles sets his defense to the field. He doesn't set it by formation. So most of the time you're going to get that overhang nickel, Sonny Styles, or the adjuster, Josh Proctor, to the field. And so, but when Notre Dame was in 11 personnel or 12, when they had one back, Ohio State was pretty successful in run defense. So here, what I wanted to focus on with JT Tuimoloau was really good all game, handling split blocks, pullers. He would wrong arm or dent them, to use a Greg Madison term, to spill the football. And when Ohio State had someone there to spill the football to, it worked well. So here you have, JT, he wrong arms, he forces the football outside, and Davison Igbinosun is there for the tackle. I think that, I appreciate Igbinosun is a very physical corner. It's been a while since Ohio State's probably had a corner that really like to tackle in the run game like he does. So, I also wanted to note that. But this is an example of, I think there has been quite a bit of talk about, potential issues with the Ohio State run game. The PFF grades for the Ohio State linebackers were very poor. I thought kind of ridiculously so, to be honest. But I think that there was a lot of instances where Ohio State handled the Notre Dame run game well. And these are 2 guys who stand out. We're going to talk about a couple more, but that gets into then the next play where I want to show where Ohio State did have some struggles against the Notre Dame run game.
Yeah, if they couldn't run the ball with 1 backs, 2 backs must be twice as good, and that actually was kind of true for long stretches on Saturday night. So let's take a look at this 2-back ISO play.
This is the area where Ohio State really did have some struggles, was handling 2 backs. And my guess is that this is a new wrinkle that Notre Dame showed. I don't know if they had any film of them using 21 personnel, tight end with 2 backs, and using that 1 back is essentially a fullback to lead block. So, when you're inserting a fullback or a lead blocker, that changes the run fits for the defense, right? You're creating essentially another extra gap between where that blocker is inserting himself. And Ohio State had struggles, and particularly on this play, it's a lead draw or an isolation play. Kind of old school. You don't see it a lot that much anymore. And they also had some issues with gap scheme. And part of it was just, Jim Knowles took a lot of criticism last year for being too, playing too aggressively and giving up explosive play. And he talked earlier this season about how, he had learned from that. He was not looking to do that this year. And that showed in this game, right? Notre Dame came into it and had quite a few explosive pass plays. And they really did not in this game. Ohio State limited them. I think they had maybe 3 passes over 20 yards. And like 2 of those were on, 1 or 2 of those were screen passes. And then he hit the tight end a couple of times. So they did kind of have a bend but don't break. But part of that was, they were not overcommitting to the run game. So like, I'm going to give a couple examples like where they did commit more numbers and the difference it made. But like on this play, like they're just down a man. Like, they have an extra gap. Tommy Eichenberg takes on the lead blocker in the hole. And basically though, you need someone there to handle that. You have 2 mistakes. And so it just is how long is it going to take them to come down the line, come down and make the play, as opposed to essentially bringing an 8th defender in the box to account for the fact that you now have, 6, 7 blockers in the game.
All right. So now we're going to go to another one. This is another Ross special where the TV is talking all about Mike Hall and the replay is focused on Mike Hall. And Ross says Proctor and Hall making tackle. So, okay, why is this a Josh Proctor play and not a Mike Hall play?
So this is kind of what I'm trying to drive at again, right? So like, there's been a lot of talk after the game of, Ohio State's got worn down. Like that's kind of a classic football trope, right? Like Ohio State got worn down up front, or like linebackers got tired and didn't fill the proper gaps. And I'm not saying some of that didn't happen, but like a lot of what did happen, as I'm saying, is like Notre Dame at times created more gaps in the run game than Ohio State wanted to defend. They essentially, as I said, made the choice to trade off giving up a little bit more in the run game to defend against big pass plays. And like conversely, on this play where they didn't do that, you can see the difference it makes. So again, you got 2 backs here. We've got 2 tight ends effectively. And but on the flip side, this is one of those situations where you got Sonny Styles, essentially a Sam linebacker on the edge. You have Josh Proctor as essentially a 4-3 over playing the C gap as a Sam linebacker. So you saw some of that during the game, and he's pretty effective doing it, right? And so now the difference is you do have every gap cover. Like, yes, Mike Hall makes a swim move. He makes some nice play in the backfield. But even without that, again, same situation. Like you got Eichenberg taking on a lead blocker with his outside shoulder. But now the difference is you have a safety sitting there that can make the tackle in the gap over. So it does go beyond just like they were tired. Again, like defensively, you can't always do it all, right? Like they are in fact playing a good team. So you sometimes have this, I don't know if it's an Ohio State specific phenomenon. Maybe it happens with other teams where it's like before the game, there's lots of national media. There's other people picking Notre Dame to win. And then after the game, it's like, well, why wasn't, Tommy Eichenberg perfect filling every gap play? Why was he getting locked up by Joel Alt? It's like when you play other good teams, like you're not going to be perfect. Like they are going to beat you at times, but like it does sometimes come down to just how many numbers. And, you can see that like Knowles could have made alternative choices. Like the play after this, he goes back to playing Tampa 2 and Notre Dame gets a big run play. So like maybe that wasn't the right call there, but like his goal clearly was to focus on keeping Sam Hartman off balance. Like they mixed in man, he mixed in a lot of zone. He played some soft zone. And he did catch them off balance. Like Notre Dame kept wanting to run mesh on 3rd and 4th and short. And like Ohio State would drop, which is a man beater, and Ohio State would drop into a zone. So hard to know the counterfactual. Like what would have happened if Ohio State played, snap after snap against Notre Dame like this with 8 guys in the box and single high and like dare you to throw play after play. Maybe you get a few more stops. Maybe you give up some explosive plays. It's sort of a trade-off. But there were scheme reasons why they had some issues against the Notre Dame run game to the boundary, particularly from 2 back.
Well, let's go next to a play where Ohio State had no issue stopping the run. This is one you're definitely everyone is going to remember this one, I think. Some of the stuff earlier was a little bit, maybe not something that jumped out to everyone. This is one everyone's going to remember. JT Tuimoloau getting in the backfield, stopping Sam Hartman for a big loss on that last Notre Dame drive. This is one of the biggest plays of the game.
Yeah, and so, again, this is sort of the culmination of part of this, I grabbed this because there's, again, a lot of focus on the defensive ends. And like, it's all the focus is always about sacks or lack thereof. And particularly in a game like this, I mean, their principal job for most of it is playing the run. And JT Tumala is again, an excellent run defender. You see they come to 4 here. So, the same thing applies. Like Notre Dame runs a 2-back power here, which is an issue play they've been having trouble with all game. But he's so forceful and wrong arming and taking on the pulling guard that essentially it forces Sam Hartman to keep the ball. And he would have made the play on the running back. He would have made the play on the quarterback. So, there was a stat out there today I saw about Ohio State's adjusted pressure rate and, showing it's one of the best in the nation. And, so maybe there is some, how much pressure the defensive ends are getting are one thing, but like you can't sacrifice playing the run to do it either. So, we talked about that the other week with Jim Knowles and like some of the techniques that they use to force the football outside. And so again, like anything else, like they have a multifaceted job, so it has to be taken into context. But yes, this to me is the play that obviously changed the game because they had to finally force Notre Dame behind the sticks.
All right. And something we've talked about a bunch in the past in the context of the Ohio State defense is sim pressures. And, they need to be running more sim pressures. Next up is a play where they do that. And Tyleik Williams darn near has what could have been one of the great large gentleman interception returns of all time and just missed it. But it still worked out worked out pretty well for Ohio State. So Ross, run us through this one.
Yeah, after all that we've talked about sim pressures, I couldn't help but grab one. And so this is the first time we've seen this from Knowles, right? So it's like a double B gap pressure from the linebackers, but a lot of times he's done that and dropped the defensive ends as rats. So it is cover 0 with 2 like quote unquote rats, which just means they're sort of underneath defenders watching the quarterback's eye. But here he does with the defensive tackle, which obviously works out really advantageous. I'm assuming Sam Hartman, he's seen the same tape and assumed that it would be defensive ends dropping. And so he looks immediately to the middle of the field where Tyleik Williams is sitting. But I think bigger picture, again, like we've been sort of saying, like the defense continues to develop, right? And like this is another sign of it. And, I think there's an argument in this game, and we'll talk about this with the next play, that maybe at times he almost went to the other extreme and got a little too bend but don't break. It's hard to find the right balance. I think keeping to mix in sim pressures like this, particularly if you don't feel like your front four is creating pressure, is a nice way to get some pressure. It's a different, you're seeing more zone coverages out of them. They're matching more in cover 3. There's some hiccups, I think, in their zone coverages, which is maybe why they continue to like to use man when they run these kind of 4-man pressures. But I do think you're seeing like continued growth and sort of like, when people are talking about like, well, what's the difference between year 1 and year 2? And like, you're obviously from Jim Knowles' perspective, he thought that they could only handle so much last year. And now with the more experienced group, you're seeing more and more volume of scheme being introduced.
All right. And then finally, this is something Ohio State fans probably pulled their hair out a little bit on. One of these passes to the tight end, just kind of up the seam. And this was a big, this was a 3rd and 10 conversion for Notre Dame. Feels like you saw, I think Mitchell Evans had, 7 catches, something like that. It felt like every single one of them was a big first down. I don't know if that was actually right, but it sure felt like it at times on Saturday night. So what was Notre Dame doing here that found a weak spot in the Ohio State defense?
Yeah, and so I guess this goes to what we were sort of talking about, this sort of the opposite side of it, right? So I guess on the one hand, I agree with your assessment. Like that, the tight end definitely made some big progress. I guess if you gave Jim Knowles true serum, I bet he would probably be like, well, a couple of explosive plays we give up are to the tight end for 20 yards. Like that's not that bad of a trade-off. But this one, this one hurt because it's 3rd and 10 in this situation. And like this is the drive that leads Notre Dame to go ahead score, I believe, one of their 2 scores. And, this is your chance to get off the field, right? So like when you're talking about bend but don't break, like you get them behind the chains. This sort of goes to the development of the defense and like what we've seen and haven't seen. So we're talking about the sim pressure. This is cover 2. And, as I said, so like in cover 3, they're matching some now. So like you saw that on a 3rd and 3, Hartman threw a little hook route and Proctor was guarding that man and broke it up. But it was a really nice play. And that's because he was matching that route. Cover 2, you're not seeing it so much, right? And so like at a minimum, Cody Simon's in here at will linebacker. So, a little bit of probably, you give him a little bit of slack. He hasn't played a ton. Knowles brought him in for like a series each in the first and second half for Steel Chambers. And I don't know if that was because of Chambers' performance against the run or because, Cody Simon's a good run defender, so they wanted to change it up. But you got to at least get your hands on tight end. I'd like to see them reroute and carry that route down the field. Like against cover 2, you shouldn't allow this route to be completed. I mean, I guess Notre Dame allowed the same route to be completed to Emeka and Ibuka to the 1 yard line. So, it's not like out of the question, but like you do have to disrupt this route so much. So I do think that there's still growth to be had in terms of, matching some of these routes in zone and sort of, again, mixing up the pressure schemes. Like, again, this is cover 2. Be nice if they, that it wouldn't just be the one sim pressure that we'd have to show, like that there'd be other ones that they could perhaps use in this situation where you could use it with a zone. So maybe that's still to come. But, I think obviously these are big steps forward. I think, Notre Dame or Ohio State's strategy made quite a bit of sense, particularly if if Ohio State had a couple breaks like that we talked about on offense, whether they convert some of the short yardages we talked about or Ibuka catches that ball in the end zone and Ohio State kind of builds the lead that they could never quite get to, even though they kept moving the football, then like Ohio State's strategy of really forcing Notre Dame to sort of string together these small yardages really made more sense. But even as it is, obviously it kept Ohio State in the game when they weren't converting offensively. And so, there's trade-offs to everything, but I think they still need to calibrate that middle ground a little bit more.
All right. Well, hope you guys enjoyed that. And if you're listening to this on a podcast platform and you're thinking, this show would be better if I could actually see what he's talking about. Oh, friends, I have great news. You can watch it all on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. We are showing the broadcast, what they showed on the broadcast. Sometimes that means there's even a replay. You can look at it from a different angle. So if you want to watch this, you can just find it on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. And if you're thinking, I wish I didn't have to wait so long for the next Raw show. Well, friends, we post these as soon as they're done. We typically record these a day or maybe more than a day early. When we record them early, I try and get them edited early and get them posted early, just exclusively for our members at BuckeyeHuddle.com. And not only do you get to watch it early, you also get to ask Ross questions there in the thread on our Huddle board. So if you were interested in watching these a little early and maybe getting a little bit of, I have a follow-up question and I keep talking into my phone or yelling at YouTube and nothing's happening, well, check us out on the Huddle board at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Ross will answer your questions there, along with some of our other scheme guys. He mentioned Devin off the beginning of the show, but we've got Justin and Mikey, whole team full of X's and O's guys, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. So if you like listening to this, you like reading about this, well, that would be the place to do it. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.